enjoy the movie. I believe it's a nice one, and right now I just open to receive any question, any comment, whatever you want to say.
Okay. I don't know if you were, I don't know where you were socioeconomically when you were, you grew up in Venezuela a little bit or no?
Yes.
All right. Now, in the poor area, well, it was mostly all poor, I guess, at one time. What's the mindset to keep the people from preying on each other in the poor areas? Because we had that big problem here in the urban areas and the ghettos in Chicago and around America here. What was the mindset? I mean, was it just a way? I guess I'm trying to ask you. What kept you guys from preying on each other?
I don't get the
Somebody translate.
Maybe someone, I didn't get the question.
The crowd-like attitude we have in the poor areas in America.
I think Milton's asking, in the United States, you often find poor people stealing from or hurting other poor people. Is this the same in Venezuela, or if not, what do you attribute in poor neighborhoods, Venezuelans sticking together and building a political movement, really, it seems.
Because that's a long way
from each other.
From not having nothing to, becoming president.
Yes. I mean, Chavez's origins are like from working class. He comes from a working class family. I mean, their parents both were teachers, and he had the chance to go to the military academy in Venezuela and become an officer of the army, and then all his military and then political races start. But in terms of the problems of poverty, I believe that when we talk about that in Venezuela, we have to refer to the 50s or 60s, after the last dictatorship we had, that was ousted in 1958. And a few years ago, we were celebrating 60 something. From 68 to 2011 is
52, yeah.
53 years of democracy. And immediately after the ousted of that dictator, the next governments that came into power in Venezuela somehow start to create the big amount of poverty that we inherited in Venezuela when Chavez took power. I'm talking that most of those shanty towns that you see in the mountains from Caracas, from the video footage, I mean, most of those things are not things that were created by Chavez, they are things that we inherited. And when Chavez took power, the poverty was around 75% or something like that, and the extreme poverty was somewhere between 40 or 50%, I believe. I have the precise data, but it was something like that, and that's a lot more deeper social problem than the one that you have right now here in the U.S. Even though you manage in the U.S. to try to focalize or create these ghettos, as you mentioned, where poor people live. We have those things in Venezuela, but it's different. It's like you don't have that sort of organization of the spaces like the one that you have here. But of course, you can see the big problem that the poverty creates in the Venezuelan society, and that of course generates a lot of insecurity problems that we actually right now are trying to fight. Right now, I mean, insecurity is a big problem even after 12 years of Chavez government. So it's a big problem, and we try to deal with those things, but we still have high levels of poverty. We haven't really managed to reduce the 70-something% of poverty to somewhere between 38 or something like that, but that's still a lot of poverty. If you compare that to the, I believe that is 11% of poverty here in the U.S., you can imagine how big the problem is. Imagine that the poverty that you have right now in the U.S. triples.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea.
All right, so when the poverty triple in the U.S., the crime rate tripled. That's what I'm trying to ask. What happens in Venezuela as
Yeah, I right now, I believe that I think what you want me to say. Basically, that's true. I mean, that terrible insecurity and poverty problem that we inherited somehow pushed the whole Venezuelan society in the obligation to decide for a change. And that's why in 1998 we chose the Chavez proposal of bringing a new system and proposing a new constitution and changing the way the politics used to behave in our country. So if you ask me, when I was in 98 voting for Chavez, I was not such a big political activist or militant of a political party or something like that, even though I came from a very progressive family. But I voted mostly for Chavez because I saw that if we didn't vote for a change, the country was going to explode, literally. It's not sarcastic. So somehow that was part of the decision-making process that happened in my mind when I was voting for Chavez in 98. So somehow that gives you, I mean, society, the reality of each country and the social problems of each country sometimes led to big changes. And that's what happened in Venezuela, and I hope you here in the U.S. manage not to go so deep into the social problems to realize that sometimes you need to change things. Any other questions?
Are you seeing a more progressive policy change towards Venezuela from the U.S. as the years progress with Obama, or do you see it going backwards? Or?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you ask me, I don't see, in terms of foreign policy of the U.S. toward the whole Latin American continent, I don't see too much change between the Bush government and the Obama. Even though you might see some signals that the ones that Oliver Stone was trying to show to us in the documentary, that might let you see that there is a possibility of change, but the reality is that we have been seeing in recent months in the foreign policy of the U.S. towards Latin America seems worse things than the things that happened during the Bush administration. For example, you see the whole contradictory situation around the coup d'etat in Honduras, for example. You see the very deep military presence in Haiti after the earthquake. When you have something between 20,000 or 30,000 troops there that are more than the necessaries to keep the security in the country, and somehow the Caribbean islands might feel them like a threat for changes. You see like different, situations that, in my case, make me have the conclusion. Of course, those things might change. I'm optimist. I'm always optimist, but according to what I see during the Obama administration, I don't see too much of a change.